For 10 years, he guarded the nation, once standing atop the White House to command five-star generals and single-handedly suppressing carrier fleets in the Western Ocean. He crushed the allied forces of the world, decapitated the legendary eight-headed serpent on a distant island, and returned home to find 12 war gods awaiting him. They knelt in unison, offering the war god's jade seal and pleading for him to lead the Temple of War and command the million-strong Silver Dragon army. They wanted him to sweep away all foreign threats, but he looked upon that supreme power with total indifference. From this day on, the legendary war god is no more. Now, there is only an ordinary man named Lin Feng. His only wish is to protect his parents and sister. As these words left his lips, he took a single step, and the very fabric of space seemed to contract. In just a few breaths, he had traveled 10,000 miles. We find him standing before a simple, unadorned house, his heart heavy with emotion. 10 years ago, while on his way to see his girlfriend, Chun Inoa, he received an emergency S-rank military order. He was drafted instantly, without even a chance to say goodbye. Now, a decade later, he wonders if his family is safe. Lost in thought, he descended to the ground. But at that exact moment, the door of the small house was suddenly flung open. Amidst cries of terror, two brutal men emerged, dragging a young girl out by force. She begged them to stop, crying that she had learned her lesson. The men told her to shut her mouth. Seeing this, Lin Feng's expression darkened instantly. It was his sister, Xiaoyao. The realization that someone dared to bully his sister filled him with a cold, lethal rage. In a flash, he moved, appearing directly in front of the two thugs. He gave them exactly 3 seconds to get lost or face the consequences. The leader, a man with a scarred face and a shaved head, reacted immediately. He pulled a dagger from his waist, warning the young man not to meddle in things that didn't concern him. But before he could even finish his sentence, Lin Feng's hands shot out like lightning, seizing both men by their wrists. They struggled, shouting at him to let go and asking if he knew who they were. They claimed to be with the Three Mouths of Sugar gang, a name that meant nothing to him. With a cold snort, he sent a surge of spiritual energy through his hands and into their bodies. With a sudden burst of strength, he tossed them over 10 meters away. If his sister hadn't been watching, he would have dealt with these bastards far more severely. Simply shattering their internal meridians with energy felt like a mercy, to be honest. After finishing with them, he turned quickly to his sister. Xiaoyao, are you alright? He asked. But Lin Yunyao stepped back, her eyes filled with suspicion. She maintained a safe distance, thanking the kind stranger for his help. Seeing his own sister so cautious and afraid, a wave of sorrow hit him. A deep sorrow rose from the depths of his heart as he asked, Xiaoyao, don't you recognize me? I'm your brother, Lin Feng. Lin Yunyao froze for a moment as a face from her distant memories began to merge with the man before her, and her eyes welled with tears. You have the wrong person. I don't have a brother, she claimed. Lin Feng stood there, stunned, feeling as if his heart were being torn apart. He tried to ask what happened, but Yunyao's sudden shout cut him off. Don't call me Xiaoyao. You weren't there when our parents died. Now that the house is about to be demolished, you finally show up? Lin Feng, you are truly a disappointment. He trembled at her words. Instinctively, he grabbed her shoulders. What did you say? Mom and Dad are gone. When? Their health was always so good. At this, Yunyao could no longer suppress her sobbing. It was the second year after you vanished. They spent everything they had trying to find you. They were hit by a car while searching for you, and just left us. She violently shook off his hand, her voice turning ice cold. Look at you now, Lin Feng. Did that girl, Chin Inua, finally dump you? Are you homeless now, so you decided to come back? You're barely even human. He tried to explain that she had it all wrong, that he had his reasons, but he hesitated. Military secrets cannot be leaked, after all. Although the borders were temporarily peaceful, if enemy nations knew he had left, they would surely attack. The news of his return had to remain a secret. Get out, she screamed. I don't want to hear your nonsense, or ever see you again. From the moment our parents died, I had no family left in this world. Lin Feng, I will never forgive you. She slammed the door shut with a finality that echoed through the small courtyard. And with the sound of the bolt sliding into place, he was left alone in the silence. He stared blankly at the closed door, his heart filled with an infinite desolation. It took a long time for him to steady his emotions. Xiaoyao, whether you believe me or not, I'm back now and I'm not leaving again. I don't care about the demolition money at all. You're my sister. I won't let anyone bully you ever again. Even through the thick iron door, he could clearly hear her muffled weeping. Get some sleep, Xiaoyao. I'll be right here guarding the door. If you need anything, just call for me. To be honest, it was the least he could do. After saying this, he found a flat corner in the courtyard and sat down to organize his thoughts. Since he was back, things would have to change. With his parents gone, his only goals now were to protect his sister and focus on his cultivation. As for Chun Inua, the thought of her made him pause. He couldn't help but drift back into his memories. Inua had been his girlfriend since high school, a romance that had lasted 7 long years. She had even promised to marry him, but fate had other plans. He let out a long sigh and a bitter laugh. Inua. 10 years had passed. He felt he had failed her, imagining that by now, she likely had a family of her own. If given the chance, he vowed to make amends. He wanted to compensate her for everything she had lost because of his sudden disappearance. Back then, he had placed all his hopes on his training. He hadn't disappointed. In just 10 years, he had surpassed everyone's expectations. He had become peerless in the world. The night passed in a flash, and as he opened his eyes from his meditation, the door to the small house creaked open. Lin Yunyao walked out carrying a basin of dirty clothes. He immediately offered to help, but Yunyao simply shot him a sharp, cold glare. She told him to move aside, but he insisted, gently taking the basin from her hands and heading toward the river. There was no need for her to be polite with him. However, as he knelt by the water, he noticed the clothes were faded and worn thin from years of repeated washing. It was a sight that stung his heart. He told her not to keep these old things, promising to buy her new clothes, but Yunyao only looked at him with indifference before turning away. She went back inside, dismissing his kindness as fake. With a wry smile, he finished the laundry quickly and hung it up to dry. He was preparing to head out to find a way to earn some money when a small pink car pulled up to the courtyard gate. A fashionably dressed girl stepped out. She gave him a strange, suspicious look before walking past him into the yard, as if he weren't even there. She called out for Yunyao, who came running out to greet her. It was Li Xiaoke, a friend who had arrived at just the right moment. Xiaoke noticed Yunyao's red, swollen eyes and frowned with concern, asking her why she had been crying. Yunyao simply shook her head and pulled Xiaoke inside, leaving Lin Feng standing alone outside the door. He assumed this girl was his sister's friend. Just to be safe, he decided to listen in. Inside the room, Xiaoke glanced back toward the doorway where he was standing. She asked who the shady-looking guy at the door was, noting he didn't look like a good person. Yunyao just shook her head, claiming she didn't know him. She suggested he was probably just a beggar looking for a meal. Little did they know, he could hear every single word they were saying. The words drifted clearly into his ears. He wondered if he truly looked that disreputable, but inside, Yunyao seemed eager to change the subject. She quickly cut to the chase, asking Xiaoke why she had come by. Xiaoke suddenly remembered her purpose and mentioned that school had started a month ago. She asked why Yunyao hadn't been attending, wondering if it was because of the tuition fees. Yunyao hesitated, her words catching in her throat. She turned her gaze away, admitting that she actually planned to find a job instead. She claimed entering society early would be good for gaining experience. Xiaoke wouldn't hear of it, suggesting she apply for a student loan if money was the issue. To her, giving up now made no sense at all. After all, Yunyao had worked so hard to get into Jinling University. Yunyao only gave a bitter laugh, explaining that it was useless because of those people. To force her into selling the house cheaply, they were intentionally sabotaging her. Her applications for financial aid were being blocked at every turn. Hearing this, Xiaoke gritted her teeth in anger. She called it outrageous and promised to talk to the counselor about organizing a fundraiser for her. She was determined to get Yunyao back into school, but Yunyao simply shook her head. She insisted that finding a job was fine and promised to treat Xiaoke to dinner later. At this point, Lin Feng simply couldn't listen anymore. He pushed the door open and stepped inside, unable to contain his frustration. He was a peerless god of war, yet his own sister was being forced to drop out of school. Had he not overheard them, he might never have known. He had no idea how much she had been suffering in secret. In that moment, he felt a cold urge to deal with those who had bullied her once and for all. He told her firmly that she must go to school and that he would handle the money. Xiaoke, startled by his sudden entrance, immediately shielded Yunyao. She called him a lunatic and threatened to call the police if he didn't leave immediately. To be honest, her protective instinct was quite impressive. However, he ignored her threats, his mind completely made up. He told Yunyao that whether she accepted him or not, her education was non-negotiable. With that, he turned and left the house, heading straight for the Jinling city center. As he walked, he began to consider his options for earning money. We should note that while he had once possessed vast wealth, his return to the country had changed everything. He had chosen a different path. He had resigned from his position as the god of war to live as an ordinary man, leaving his fortune to the soldiers guarding the borders. He was currently penniless, but for a man of his talents, making money was hardly a challenge. Alchemy, medicine, or even feng shui, he mastered them all. After a moment of thought, he made his way to the Jiangning General Trading Market in the north of the city. He knew exactly where to start. This place sold everything and attracted all sorts of people, a lawless zone where, after entering, Lin Feng found a random spot to settle. On the stone tiles, he wrote a few bold words, for hire for 2 hours, capable of anything, master of everything, price, negotiable. He then sat cross-legged, waiting for a person of destiny to cross his path, and because his sign was so provocative, many passers-by gathered. They came to see the spectacle, and some even approached with a mocking attitude, intentionally asking bizarre questions about whether he could cure certain ailments. They asked for physical enhancements or other absurdities, which he naturally ignored, until a coarse, booming voice suddenly drifted into his ears. "Boss, this kid is too young. He's clearly just bragging. We should probably look somewhere else," the voice suggested, sounding quite skeptical. They felt they couldn't waste more time, fearing that if a solution wasn't found, the construction site would face a major disaster. But finding a true master capable of subduing demons and ghosts was no easy task, and hearing this, Lin Feng looked toward a nearby Hummer. A group of people in the vehicle were sizing him up, so with a quick thought, he immediately began to shout his credentials aloud. He claimed to be a master of everything, especially exorcism, and after his brief performance, he simply packed up his things as if to leave. Before he could take 2 steps, a middle-aged man rushed from the Hummer to stop him, calling out for the young brother to wait. With a slight smirk, Lin Feng stopped and studied the man, noting an extraordinary aura that commanded respect without even trying. He seemed like someone who either ruled the underworld or held a high position. He was certainly no ordinary citizen, as Lin Feng's vision shifted. Through his chi-observing technique, the world turned white, and he saw a cluster of dark energy manifesting on the middle-aged man's forehead. Despite his strong vitality, there was a lingering evil aura between his brows, a clear sign that something foul had latched onto him. The man began to introduce himself as Wang Chong, but Lin Feng cut him off mid-sentence, stating that his time was quite limited. Wang Chong gave him a long, deep look before explaining that very strange things had recently been happening at his construction site. The workers claimed they could hear children crying in the middle of the night, and just last night, someone went out to the restroom. The worker encountered a spirit and fell gravely ill immediately, yet even the hospital couldn't find anything wrong with him. Hearing this, Lin Feng already had a general idea of the cause, for even in this modern age, traces of spiritual energy still linger. Spiritual energy can give birth to all sorts of mountain spirits and ghosts, and it seemed a certain weasel had gained intelligence and was using dark arts to extend its own life. Lin Feng addressed him directly, noting that if the matter wasn't handled correctly, it wouldn't just be the construction site at risk, but the boss himself. He asked if the man had been sleeping poorly lately, a question that left Wang Chong visibly shaken by its accuracy. The man admitted that Lin Feng was spot on. Every night, he felt as though a pair of invisible eyes were staring directly at him. Yet, whenever he turned on the lights, there was nothing there, so he told Lin Feng to name his price as long as he could solve it. Hearing this, Lin Feng didn't hold back, asking for 100,000 yuan to guarantee the problem would be fixed, causing Wang Chong's eyes to narrow. The boss remarked that the money was nothing to him, and if the issue was truly resolved, everyone would be happy. However, he added a stern warning. If Lin Feng was lying, crushing someone like him would be as easy as stepping on an ant. Lin Feng simply gave a disdainful smile, assuring the man that even if he were lying, Wang Chong wouldn't be able to do a thing about it. Wang Chong laughed at the young man's boldness and invited him to the site, but Lin Feng shook his head and headed back into the market. He returned with ink and paper, scribbled a few quick characters, and handed the sheet to Wang Chong, who looked at the talisman with confusion. With a darkening expression, the boss asked if he was seriously expected to believe that a single piece of paper could solve all his problems. Lin Feng nodded quite seriously, instructing him to paste it at the entrance of the site, promising that everything would return to normal shortly. This was no ordinary paper, of course. It was a rune written with spiritual chi that no sane spirit would dare to ignore. Wang Chong suspected he was being scammed, but seeing Lin Feng's absolute composure, he found himself wavering. He decided to trust him just this once, though he threatened that if he were being fooled, Lin Feng's entire family would pay the price. At those words, Lin Feng's gaze turned icy, and the surrounding temperature seemed to drop to the freezing point instantly. He told the man to repeat what he had just said, and facing that piercing stare, Wang Chong felt his hair stand on end as if death were looming. He didn't understand why he was suddenly so afraid, but his intuition told him that he needed to back down immediately or face dire consequences. That intuition had saved his life countless times before, so he quickly waved his hands, urging the young man to calm down as the killing intent faded. The air remained icy as Lin Feng warned him to watch his mouth, demanding the full 100,000 yuan up front with no credit allowed. Hearing this, Wang Chong finally breathed a sigh of relief and quickly had his driver bring over a suitcase filled with cash. He handed over the money, and as Lin Feng took it, he paused and pulled out his pen again, thinking one talisman might not be enough. He offered to draw 2 more just to be safe, but Wang Chong's face twitched as he insisted that one was more than enough. In the boss's mind, paying this much for a scrap of paper was already madness. He certainly wasn't going to buy any more. Lin Feng simply turned to leave, casually mentioning that if he changed his mind later, the price wouldn't be nearly so cheap. After leaving the market, he headed toward a nearby shopping street, keenly aware that Wang Chong's men were tailing him. He didn't mind, though. He was quite satisfied with the deal since that money would finally cover his sister's school fees. After buying his sister new clothes and a phone, he led his pursuers into a narrow alleyway and simply vanished into the sky. The stalker behind him rubbed his eyes in disbelief, certain that his mind was playing tricks on him as he watched the man soar away. Once he realized Lin Feng had truly flown off, he collapsed in terror and scrambled to call Wang Chong with trembling hands. He stammered into the phone that he had lost him, or rather, that the man wasn't human at all because he had literally flown away. On the other end, Wang Chong was standing at the construction site, his expression shifting as he processed this impossible news. He told himself it was nonsense, but then his site manager approached, looking skeptically at the paper Lin Feng had provided. The manager asked if that scribble, which looked worse than his primary school son's drawings, could really do anything at all. Wang Chong snapped back that since he'd already paid for it, it had better work, or they were all out of options. Just then, a crack of thunder echoed behind him, and he turned in horror to see the talisman glowing with a brilliant purple light. The charred corpse of a weasel suddenly appeared beneath the paper, and seeing this, Wang Chong realized he had found a true master. Overjoyed and desperate, he immediately ordered his men to search the city and find the whereabouts of that young man at any cost. But at the exact moment the weasel died, in a cave miles away, a white-haired old man suddenly coughed up a mouthful of blood. The old man spat out a mouthful of blood, his face twisting in a snarl as he demanded to know who dared to harm his precious weasel. Wiping the blood from his chin, he sprinted toward the construction site, while Lin Feng landed 100 meters from his home to avoid being seen. He carried his shopping bags, intending to walk the rest of the way, but the sudden roar of engines from his house made his expression darken. He immediately activated his spirit eyes, and in an instant, the scene at the small house was laid bare before him, and it wasn't a pleasant sight. 2 excavators were parked in the yard, and a dozen thugs had surrounded Lin Yunyao and Li Xiaoke, shouting all sorts of filthy insults at them. The air was thick with their crude language, leaving the 2 girls trapped and vulnerable. Facing the hungry, predatory gazes of these men, Lin Yunyao closed her eyes in utter despair, fearing the worst was about to happen. Li Xiaoke, however, shook her head and firmly shielded Yunyao behind her as the leader of the group, a man called Brother Ji, stepped forward. Brother Ji licked his lips with a sickening grin and gave the order for his men to move in. 2 lackeys approached the girls with wicked smiles, and watching this, Lin Feng felt his blood begin to boil with a cold, righteous fury. The killing intent surging from his body was so intense that even the sky and earth seemed to change color in response to his rage. With a single step, he caused the very space around him to contract, appearing instantly inside the courtyard with a voice as cold as ice. His words echoed in everyone's ears, and hearing that familiar voice, Lin Yunyao looked up in shock and disbelief. Her gaze was dazed, while the thugs, after a brief moment of confusion, quickly snapped back to reality and prepared to face the intruder. Lin Feng walked expressionlessly toward the 2 lackeys, his hands darting out like lightning to seize both of them by their throats. He lifted them straight off the ground, leaving the crowd stunned as he held 2 grown men aloft as if they weighed nothing at all. With a casual toss, he sent them flying over 10 meters away, their bodies hitting the ground with a force that left their fate uncertain. He then turned his icy gaze toward Brother Ji, who narrowed his eyes, sensing a flicker of genuine danger emanating from the young man. But relying on his superior numbers, the thug felt no fear, certain that one command would result in Lin Feng being hacked to pieces. Brother Ji barked out a curse, asking Lin Feng if he had a death wish for interfering with the business of the Senko Hall. He remained indifferent to the mention of that rude name, but Li Xiaoke and Lin Yunyao turned pale, and Yunyao reached out with a trembling hand. She tapped his shoulder and whispered, "Lin Feng, maybe we should just let this go." It was rumored that Tan Ziming, the student council president, was the son of a Senko Hall master. Almost no one dared to provoke him. Even city officials bowed and called him young Master Tan. Lin Feng looked back at his sister in surprise. This was the first time she had initiated a conversation with him, and though she didn't call him brother, her tone was clearly filled with concern. As for this Senko Hall, he decided he would simply find some time later to wipe them out. Hearing Yunyao's plea, Brother Ji's arrogance only grew. He sneered that it wasn't over until they paid $1 million in medical fees for his men. Lin Feng let out a cold laugh. He agreed it wasn't over, for there was only one possible ending for those who dared to bully his sister. The moment those words left his lips, he lunged forward like a sharpened blade. Brother Ji waved his hand dismissively, and a dozen lackeys immediately drew their steel blades and charged. However, in just a few seconds, every single one of them lay on the ground with shattered bones. Brother Ji was utterly petrified, as such combat power was rare even within the ranks of the Senko Hall. Before he could even react, Lin Feng was already standing directly in front of him. "Your turn," he said coldly, causing the thug to shiver and collapse onto his backside. He begged for mercy, claiming he never would have touched the house if he'd known how powerful Lin Feng was. But suddenly, from behind, his sister's panicked cry rang out, warning Lin Feng to watch out as an excavator swung its massive arm toward him. He stopped the machine with ease and looked at the driver, asking if he was having fun. The driver burst into tears, sobbing that he wanted to go home. Lin Feng raised an eyebrow and agreed to send him home. With a flick of his finger, he launched a small pebble that pierced the driver's vital point. Having finished that, he turned and sent Brother Ji flying with a single kick, ordering him to take his men and get out immediately. Brother Ji couldn't believe he was being let go so easily and scrambled away with his subordinates. They had no idea, of course, that Lin Feng only spared them momentarily to avoid scaring Yunyao. He had already destroyed their lifelines. They would all be dead by morning. After this rescue, he felt his sister's attitude toward him softened significantly. She accepted his gifts and even invited him to stay for dinner. After the meal, Li Xiaoke drove away, leaving the 2 of them alone in the small house. He began to clear the table, but then something happened. He noticed his sister watching him intently. Perhaps, deep down, she still couldn't truly accept him. With that thought, Lin Feng offered her a gentle smile. He told her not to worry, promising to leave as soon as the dishes were done. Without her permission, he wouldn't dream of staying the night. However, Lin Yunyao simply shook her head, telling him this was his home too, and there was no need to leave. Then, she asked the question that had haunted her for a decade. She wanted to know why he had vanished 10 years ago after saying he was going to find a girlfriend. Lin Feng slowly set down the dishes, his eyes clouded with complexity. He apologized, explaining he had his reasons, but he insisted he never abandoned them for a woman. Yunyao's eyes filled with a familiar disappointment. She asked if he really intended to keep secrets even from her. A flicker of hesitation crossed his face. He couldn't tell her everything, but he could show her something. He reached out his hand, and in the next heartbeat, a ball of deep blue spiritual fire flickered into existence in his palm. It was a sight beyond all logic. Yunyao's eyes widened in absolute shock. This was spiritual fire, a flame whose core temperature could reach thousands of degrees and incinerate almost anything on Earth. He told her how sorry he was for what she and their parents had endured. No matter how much she resented him, he promised he would never be angry with her. He swore that this time, he had returned to ensure she would be safe for the rest of her life. Hearing this, Yunyao suddenly covered her mouth as her emotions overflowed. The grievances she had suppressed for years finally broke through. She begged him to stop talking. She understood that showing her such a supernatural secret was a burden. She knew that if others discovered his power, he would be in grave danger. In truth, she was simply looking for a reason to forgive him, no matter how absurd it seemed. Lin Feng's voice trembled slightly as he placed his hands on her shoulders in disbelief. He asked her to repeat what she had just called him. In response, she threw herself into his arms and began to sob uncontrollably. She apologized for being stubborn and unreasonable, finally calling him brother again. He gently patted her back, his eyes full of tenderness and pain for her. It wasn't until late into the night that her crying finally ceased. After she drifted off to sleep, he carried her to bed and stepped outside alone. His sister's earlier words had brought a certain face back to the surface of his mind. The image of Chun Inua haunted him. Driven by a sudden impulse, he used his new phone to log into his old messaging account. The moment he signed in, a flood of old notifications appeared. We see a series of desperate messages from years ago, sent by a girl who felt her world collapsing. She had written that her father was forcing her to marry someone else and begged Lin Feng to reply. The most recent message, however, was different. Sent 3 years ago, it simply said she regretted ever knowing him. Seeing those words, Lin Feng felt a sharp, stabbing pain in his heart. He wanted to send a message, yet he hesitated, his hand frozen. After calming his nerves, we see him click into her social profile, which was filled with her photos. Most of them, however, were pictures of her with a cute little girl. It seemed she really had married. Even if he wanted to make amends now, Lin Feng knew deep down that it was far too late to turn back time. He accepted that they were no longer possible, but he still planned to arrange his sister's schooling first. Once that was settled, he intended to leave her a sum of money to compensate for the last 10 years. The next morning, Li Xiaoka arrived in her car as promised. She drove them to Jinling University. After they arrived, she took Lin Yunyao to handle the enrollment paperwork, while Lin Feng decided to wander through the campus. He had graduated from this very school 10 years ago, and surprisingly, not much had changed. Just as he was reflecting on how quickly time flies, a surprised voice called out from behind him, asking if he was Lin Feng. He stopped in his tracks and turned toward the sound. To his surprise, he saw an old college classmate, Yin Jingqiu. Though their relationship had been mediocre, and they'd even had their share of friction, seeing him after a decade still brought a flicker of nostalgia to Lin Feng's heart. A small smile touched his lips as he greeted his old classmate. It had, after all, been a very long time. The modern Yun Jingqiu was dressed to impress, sporting a heavy gold watch and the unmistakable air of a successful businessman. He walked right up to Lin Feng. He looked Lin Feng up and down, the smirk on his face growing more pronounced. He asked where Lin Feng had been making his fortune all these years, noting that he had missed several class reunions. Lin Feng noticed the mocking glint in his eyes, but to be honest, he didn't much care. He simply replied that his life had been quite ordinary. Hearing this, Jingqiu gave him a patronizing pat on the shoulder, telling him to reach out if he needed help. He boasted about owning a listed company and claimed he could easily find Lin Feng a job as a security guard. He even offered a salary of 3,000 a month. Lin Feng shook his head calmly, thanking him but stating he didn't have any such needs at the moment. Seeing this blunt refusal, however, Jingqiu actually stepped forward and threw an arm around Lin Feng's shoulders. He told him that he clearly didn't understand how difficult the current job market had become. He claimed that even for a security position, he wouldn't normally look at anyone without a master's degree. A bit of an exaggeration, one would hope. He insisted he was only making an exception because of their history and asked him to reconsider. Lin Feng glanced down at the hand gripping his shoulder. His expression instantly turned cold. Just then, a phone rang in Jingqiu's pocket. He pulled it out and answered the call immediately. He addressed the caller as Vice Principal Wang, saying he had already arrived at the school and knew a great place for them to meet later. It was time for business. At that very moment, Yun Jingqiu spotted him, and his eyes lit up with a predatory brightness as he called out Lin Feng's name. He walked over, remarking on the coincidence, and asking if Lin Feng had reconsidered the job offer he mentioned earlier that morning. As his gaze drifted toward Lin Yunyao and Li Xiaoka, a flash of greed crossed his eyes. Lin Feng watched him with a cold, expressionless stare. His tone was calm, but icy as he agreed it was quite a coincidence. Jingchu noticed the shift in mood, but he didn't care in the slightest. In his mind, they were worlds apart, one in the heavens and one on the ground. Just then, a school official approached the group. The official asked if this was an acquaintance of Director Yun. Jingchu smiled, his voice dripping with a mocking sort of playfulness. He introduced Lin Feng to Vice Principal Wang, noting that back in the day, Lin Feng was the most handsome guy at Jinling University. Wang Tiangao took a closer look at him and warmly extended an invitation for their fellow alumnus to join them for a meal. Jingchu's lips curled into a smirk. He was back as a distinguished alumnus and donor, and he saw a perfect opportunity here. He planned to use Lin Feng as a prop to satisfy his own vanity at dinner, but Lin Feng simply shook his head and declined. He explained there were 3 of them, and it wouldn't be convenient. Jingchu shifted his gaze back to the 2 women, dismissing the concern. He insisted that since they were Lin Feng's friends, they should all come along, as he hadn't been introduced to the 2 beauties yet. The moment those words left his mouth, Lin Feng's gaze turned freezing. He asked if Jingchu hadn't heard him say it wasn't convenient. Jingchu narrowed his eyes, clearly surprised that Lin Feng dared to confront him in public. However, he didn't lose his temper just yet. Instead, he feigned an air of apology, suggesting that Lin Feng was only acting out because he felt inferior to his successful old classmate. He claimed he truly wanted to help and asked Lin Feng not to be so stubborn. To be honest, the display was nothing short of nauseating. Lin Feng told him to get lost, seeing that he wouldn't play along. Jingchu's face darkened as he leaned in to whisper a name, Chen Inua. He claimed to have seen her recently and asked if Lin Feng wanted to know how she was doing. Lin Feng froze, his heart racing. Jingchu patted his shoulder with a laugh, saying he'd tell him everything over dinner. Lin Yunyao grabbed her brother's hand in worry. He gave her a reassuring look before turning back to Jingchu. He would attend this dinner, after all. It was time to find out the truth. Yun Jingchu led our group to a luxury private suite on the top floor, immediately assuming the role of the grand host as he ushered everyone inside. As the meal began, we see the school officials showering him with constant flattery, and through their fawning conversation, certain details began to emerge. It appeared Jinling University was building a new independent college, but as the project neared completion, they found themselves short by over 30 million. They were hoping for a donation, and Jingchu simply shook his head with a dismissive air, acting as if 30 million was a mere pittance. To a man like him, such a sum was hardly worth mentioning, especially since he considered himself a loyal son of Jinling University. He claimed it was his duty to contribute, all while casting a subtle, mocking glance toward Lin Feng. He was clearly enjoying the contrast. In his mind, the gap between them was vast. He could produce millions on a whim, while Lin Feng likely struggled to find 3,000. While the others chatted merrily, Wang Tiangao suddenly turned his sharp, critical gaze toward Lin Feng, his tone becoming noticeably harsh. He praised Director Yun for being young and capable, unlike certain petty people who had no talent but plenty of arrogance. Yes, he was being that blunt. Wang Tiangao declared he had no respect for useless pretenders. Lin Yunyao, unable to stand such insults toward her brother, immediately stood up to protest. She demanded to know what right he had to speak to her brother that way. Wang Tiangao merely snorted, noting she was a new student at the school. He warned her that if she didn't know her place, he could easily arrange for her to lose her spot. At those words, Lin Feng's eyes turned deathly cold. When Wang Tiangao met that gaze, he felt for a moment as if he were being stared down by a demon, though he quickly tried to shake the feeling off. He reminded himself he was the vice principal of Jinling University. Why should he fear a nobody? He let out a cold laugh, asking if Lin Feng was dissatisfied. Lin Feng stood up slowly, his expression unreadable and his voice calm. He had sworn upon his return that he would never let anyone mistreat his sister. He offered the man a single chance to make amends, apologize to his sister, and he might consider showing mercy. A bold move, to be sure. Wang Tiangao's face twisted with mockery at the idea of apologizing to a young girl. Lin Feng's expression didn't change, but the atmosphere grew heavy. The air in the suite became suffocatingly tense. Nearby, Jingchu watched the drama unfold with a smirk, sensing that his moment to shine had arrived. He figured that by stepping in to break the deadlock, he could show off his influence and leave Lin Feng feeling eternally grateful to him. With that plan in mind, he walked over and patted Lin Feng's shoulder, asking everyone to settle down for his sake and move past the argument. Jingchu suggested they let the matter drop, claiming that since Lin Feng was his classmate, the sister was like his own. Wang Tiangao didn't seem to mind. He shrugged dismissively, noting that since Director Yun had spoken up, he would forgive them this once. Seeing this, the other officials began to nod. They looked at Jingchu with clear admiration. One leader even stepped forward to remind Lin Feng that he should thank Director Yun immediately. He warned that without Jingchu's intervention, things would have ended badly. Jingchu simply smiled, acting as if such a favor was beneath mention. After saying those words, his gaze remained fixed on Lin Feng, clearly waiting for a show of gratitude. However, at that exact moment, something unexpected happened. Lin Feng suddenly swung his hand, sending Jingchu flying with a sharp slap. Without even glancing at him, Lin Feng kept his eyes locked on Wang Tiangao. He gave the man 10 final seconds to apologize to his sister. Otherwise, he guaranteed the vice principal wouldn't be walking out of the room. This sudden turn of events caused a deathly silence to fall over the suite. Jingchu clutched his face in utter disbelief, staring up at Lin Feng. He demanded to know why Lin Feng had struck him after he had spoken up to help. Lin Feng ignored him entirely and began the countdown. Just as he was about to reach one, Wang Tiangao suddenly spoke up, offering a hurried apology to the young girl for his earlier rudeness. Cold sweat began to bead on the vice principal's forehead. The overwhelming pressure made him feel as though he would truly die if he didn't comply. Lin Feng gave him a cold look, accepting the apology and declaring the matter settled, provided his sister's enrollment wasn't threatened. To be honest, he was being quite clear. To ensure the message was understood, he picked up a glass and crushed it into fine powder with a light squeeze. Wang Tiangao nodded frantically. After that, Lin Feng shifted his gaze toward Jingchu, who was still glaring back with eyes wide with fury. It was a tense standoff, to say the least. Lin Feng warned that his patience was limited. For the sake of their school days, he demanded the truth about Chun In-aw in exchange for peace. Jingchu let out a sharp, angry laugh, wondering aloud where Lin Feng found the courage to speak to him in such a threatening manner. With a clap of his hands, 8 bodyguards dressed in black rushed into the room. The leader was a bald man who stood nearly 2 meters tall. A centipede-like scar crawled across the man's face, and his mere presence created an aura so heavy it was difficult for the others to breathe. The guests were visibly shaken by the sight and began to whisper among themselves. They recognized the man leading the group from television. His name was Zhao Hu, a man who had reportedly won 8 consecutive fighting championships and was known as a formidable martial artist. The crowd whispered about martial artists, those rare individuals who cultivate internal energy to reach extraordinary heights, divided into the heaven, earth, black, and yellow ranks. It was said a yellow rank fighter could defeat 100 ordinary men. Hearing these murmurs, Jingchu's arrogance only grew as he held his head high. He gestured toward his bruised face and asked Zhao Hu what should be done about the boy who had dared to slap him. To be honest, he looked quite ridiculous. Zhao Hu cracked his knuckles with a grim smile, suggesting they break 3 of the boy's limbs first and then let him decide how to apologize. Jingchu laughed in approval. He told the bodyguard to proceed exactly as planned. However, before the words could even leave his mouth, Lin Feng moved with a speed that defied the eye. He slammed Jingchu's head against the wall with such force that spiderweb cracks bloomed across the surface. To Lin Feng, this man was nothing more than a bothersome insect. The guests gasped in collective shock at the sudden violence. Seeing their employer in danger, the 8 bodyguards immediately rushed forward to surround Lin Feng. Zhao Hu adjusted his neck, his gaze turning predatory as he realized Lin Feng was also a yellow-rank martial artist. He assumed that was the source of the boy's confidence. He mocked Lin Feng for being arrogant, claiming that as a late-stage yellow-rank fighter, he wouldn't need more than 10 moves to finish him. Lin Feng simply let go of Jingchu. With a look of pure disdain, he spared Zhao Hu a glance before casually kicking Jingchu across the floor toward the bodyguard's feet. It was a dismissive gesture, really. Jingchu coughed up a mouthful of blood, his eyes burning with a murderous intent. He screamed for Lin Feng's death, questioning why he even paid his men if they were so slow. At his command, 7 bodyguards lunged at once. Yet, we see Lin Feng dodging their strikes with a calm, almost bored grace, moving through the chaos effortlessly. In just a matter of seconds, the attackers were on the floor with shattered bones. Jingchu watched in horror, cursing his men for being a group of useless failures. He reminded Zhao Hu that he was paid 2 million a year to handle such threats. Before he could finish his sentence, the scarred giant had already charged forward. Zhao Hu threw a heavy punch aimed directly at Lin Feng's face. But in a turn of events that stunned the room, Lin Feng simply raised a hand and caught it. He gripped the fist so tightly that no matter how much Zhao Hu struggled, he couldn't pull away. Lin Feng wondered aloud if this was really all 2 million baht these days. A heavy silence fell over the suite as everyone stared at the scene in disbelief. A faint, cold smile played on Lin Feng's lips as he reached out. He lightly tapped his fingertips against Zhao Hu's chest, a gesture that seemed harmless but carried a terrifying weight. The champion fighter froze in place. Jingchu shouted that Lin Feng must be using some cheap trick, refusing to believe Zhao Hu could be defeated so easily. Lin Feng looked at his distorted face with boredom. He told Jingchu he had no more time to waste and demanded the truth about Chen Inhua. Jingchu seemed to realize the situation was spiraling out of his control. Jingchu sneered, thinking he had found a way to turn the tables. He asked if Lin Feng really wanted to know about Chen Inhua, then challenged him to let him make one phone call. He promised that if Lin Feng could survive what came next, he would reveal everything. Hearing this, Lin Feng calmly sat down, telling him this was his absolute last chance. He warned that if Jingchu hesitated again, he would ensure there was nothing left of him to bury. Jingchu found this tone incredibly arrogant, as if he didn't matter at all. A surge of rage boiled within him. He told Lin Feng that being a good fighter wasn't enough, and he was about to show him the true gap between their worlds. With a flourish, he pulled out his phone and dialed a number. We see him waiting, his face tight with anticipation as he prepared to call in a massive favor. The call was answered quickly, and a deep, magnetic voice asked who was calling. Jingchu's expression shifted instantly into a look of pathetic, fawning flattery. He introduced himself as Jingchu from the Tianjin group, reminding the man, a certain Chairman Wang, that they had shared a meal recently. It was quite a performance. The guests were stunned. In Jinling City, Jingchu was considered a powerful figure, so for him to act this submissive meant the person on the line was truly influential. Chairman Wang was silent for a moment before remembering him as the man behind the Jinling University branch project. To be honest, he barely seemed to care. He asked what Jingchu wanted. Seeing that the chairman actually remembered him, Jingchu's face lit up with excitement, his ego momentarily restored. He insisted the chairman just call him Little Yun and began to explain the situation, painting himself as the victim of a violent madman. He begged for help in resolving this trouble. Chairman Wang noted he was actually nearby and told Jingchu to wait 20 minutes for his arrival. The line went dead, leaving Jingchu in a state of pure ecstasy. He had expected the chairman to send a few subordinates, not to come in person. Imagine the prestige. There were very few people in all of Jinling City who could command a personal visit from a man of Chairman Wang's stature. At that moment, a man named Wang Tiangao approached with a solemn expression and tapped Jingchu on the shoulder, his voice trembling slightly with curiosity. He asked if the Chairman Wang Jingchu just spoke to was who he thought it was, seemingly afraid to even utter the man's full name aloud. Jingchu straightened his clothes and confirmed it was indeed Chairman Wang of the Azure Dragon Construction Group. The room fell into a shocked silence. The Azure Dragon Group was a titan worth over 100 billion, the undisputed leader of the construction industry within the entire city of Jinling. Its chairman, Wang Chong, was also rumored to be the head of the Azure Dragon Gang. It was said that when Chairman Wang stomped his foot, the whole city shook. Jingchu looked at Lin Feng with a smug, triumphant grin, mentioning that his company was the one handling the new Jinling branch campus project. He explained that it was Chairman Wang's company, Tianhong Engineering, and that he had luckily run into the chairman during a recent site inspection. Not only did they have a great conversation, but they even shared a meal together. Suddenly, the way everyone looked at Jingchu changed completely. They never imagined his connections were so deep that he could befriend a titan of Jinling City. Wang Tiangao approached him with a respectful, almost fawning air. He praised Jingchu as a dragon among men, asking him to look after us old-timers in the future. Jingchu gave a generous, dismissive wave of his hand. He told them not to worry, claiming he would never forget those who helped him climb the ladder. To be honest, it was a very convincing performance. The smiles in the room grew even wider at his words. However, hearing this, Lin Yunyao couldn't help but feel a deep sense of anxiety. She whispered to her brother that they should leave, fearing this Chairman Wang was someone they couldn't afford to provoke. Lin Feng simply smiled and shook his head. He told Yunyao to take little Ku and leave first, assuring her there was no need to worry. Though she hesitated, Yunyao eventually nodded and prepared to go. She knew staying would be useless. The best thing she could do was stay out of the way. About 20 minutes later, a rhythmic sound of footsteps echoed outside. The atmosphere in the room tensed as everyone stood up. The door was pushed open, and a middle-aged man dressed in black stepped inside. Behind him stood a row of bodyguards in sharp suits. Each one carried a heavy, bloodthirsty aura, as if they had just stepped off a battlefield. It was enough to make anyone's heart skip a beat. But when Lin Feng saw the newcomer, he was momentarily stunned. Yes, life is full of surprises. It turned out that the powerful backer Jingchu had called was none other than Wang Chong. Upon entering, Wang Chong immediately locked his eyes on Jingchu. His voice was laced with irritation as he asked who was causing trouble. He demanded the person be pointed out immediately. We should note that while his recent construction site troubles were resolved, the mysterious expert who helped him had yet to be found. This had left him in a foul mood, which is why he agreed to come. He wanted to vent his frustration on someone who didn't know their place. Jingchu greeted him with a fawning smile, his heart practically bursting with joy at the sight of his savior. But as Wang Chong looked in the direction Jingchu was pointing, his expression froze. A surge of wild ecstasy suddenly flooded his heart. It was a stroke of incredible luck. The expert he had been searching for so desperately was standing right here. He began to speak in shock. Lin Feng gave a subtle shake of his head to stop him from finishing his sentence. Wang Chong understood instantly and turned his gaze back to a trembling Jingchu. That's the one. How do you want to handle this? Jingchu couldn't help but let out a mocking sneer. Chairman Wang, this kid has no idea who he's dealing with. He actually dared to lay a hand on me. I want him to suffer until he dies. Jingchu's expression twisted into a hideous mask as he glared at Lin Feng. This is what happens when you cross me, Lin Feng. Once you're dead, I'll be sure to take very good care of your sister. Chairman Wang, I want. Her limbs broken, so she regrets ever appearing before me. However, before Jingchu could even finish his sentence, Wang Chong's hand flew out in a backhand slap. The blow landed squarely on Jingchu's face, sending stars dancing before his eyes until he finally collapsed onto the floor. It was quite a sudden turn of events. We see the entire room fall into a stunned silence at this unexpected sight. Wang Tiangao and the others could only watch with their mouths hanging open in shock. Jingchu sat on the ground, looking completely bewildered. Chairman Wang, you hit the wrong person, didn't you? Before he could react, Wang Chong delivered a sharp kick. The boot caught Jingchu right in the stomach. I hit exactly who I intended to, you dog. Who do you think you are, causing trouble for a great master? Enduring the sharp pain, Jingchu looked up with a face full of confusion. What master? Chairman Wang, he's just a poor kid. How could he possibly be any kind of master? You must have been deceived by him. Wang Chong's face grew so dark it looked as though a storm were about to break. Shut up. If you dare say one more word, I'll personally cripple you. Jingchu's eyes widened in terror as he knelt on the floor, his mind seemingly beginning to fracture. Impossible. How can this be happening? Wang Chong was finished wasting words on him. Instead, under the shocked gaze of the crowd, he knelt before Lin Feng. Great master, I have finally found you. Seeing that things had taken a dangerous turn, the surrounding guests feared being caught in the crossfire. They didn't dare linger a moment longer and quickly fled the scene. Soon, the only ones left in the room were Lin Feng, Wang Chong's group, and a broken Jingchu. Lin Feng gave Jingchu a cold, indifferent glance. He stepped forward calmly and placed his foot on the man's arm. With just a slight application of pressure, the sound of snapping bone echoed through the room. Jingchu snapped back to reality, looking up at Lin Feng with eyes full of absolute despair as his screams erupted. Lin Feng, spare me. I'll tell you everything about Chen Inua. But Lin Feng acted as if he hadn't heard a word and proceeded to crush the other arm. Do you really think, Lin Feng asked quietly, that whether you speak or not is a choice you get to make? Jingchu's face turned deathly pale from the agony. His voice began to tremble uncontrollably. Lin Feng, I beg you, for the sake of our time as classmates, let me go just this once. As soon as he finished, Lin Feng moved his foot to the man's knee and crushed it without mercy. Jingchu let out a piercing shriek, the immense pain causing his features to contort hideously. Jingchu's eyes rolled back as he teetered on the edge of consciousness. Lin Feng watched him with a cold gaze before delivering a final, crushing kick to his chest. That final blow instantly snuffed out the man's life. Once the deed was done, Lin Feng knelt down and placed a hand on the corpse's forehead, beginning to circulate his power. He was performing a soul-searching technique. A moment later, a pale green light emerged from the body and merged directly into Lin Feng's own form. Wang Chong stood by, utterly mesmerized by the display. In over 30 years of life, he had never witnessed anything so inconceivable. It was enough to shatter his entire worldview. Lin Feng sifted through Jingchu's memories, seeing the world through the dead man's eyes, until he finally saw Chen Inua leading a child along. Perhaps he had been holding on to a sliver of hope before this, but confirming that Chen Inu really had a child left him feeling a strange sense of loss. After taking a moment to steady his emotions, he turned his gaze toward Wang Chong and asked what business had brought the man seeking him out. Wang Chong looked at him with profound awe, his voice becoming instinctively respectful as he explained that his construction site was in deep trouble again. After hanging the talisman Lin Feng had provided, a dead weasel appeared immediately, but that very night, things took an even more bizarre turn. The unfinished buildings collapsed without cause, crushing 8 workers. But then, their corpses actually stood up on their own and walked into the mountains. Wang Chong considered himself a man of the world who had weathered many storms, but this level of supernatural horror was something else entirely. The memory alone made his skin crawl. He pleaded with the master, offering 5 million if only Lin Feng could resolve this terrifying situation. Lin Feng simply shook his head with a faint, dismissive smile. He suggested that if Wang Chong were truly sincere, he was vastly underestimating the price of such help. He told the chairman the price would need to be 100 times higher. Wang Chong's jaw dropped in shock. 500 million was a staggering sum. Lin Feng nodded calmly, noting that if the fee seemed too high, the chairman was perfectly free to find someone else. He then stood up to leave. Panic flared in Wang Chong's chest. He had already invested billions into this project, and if this trouble wasn't fixed, all that money would be lost. He quickly moved to stop Lin Feng, agreeing to the price and suggesting they depart immediately. Lin Feng gave a satisfied nod as the group escorted him out. As they left the restaurant, Wang Chong made a quick call to have the body in the private room handled before ushering Lin Feng toward his car. But just then, a young woman suddenly rushed toward them from the side, shouting for them to let her brother go and claiming she had called the police. It was Lin Yunyao, holding her phone high and running toward them without a hint of fear. Lin Feng stepped forward and pulled her into a protective embrace. A flicker of warmth rose in Lin Feng's heart as he looked at her. He asked why she hadn't left as he told her to, while Yunyao clung to him, trembling with nerves. She admitted she was simply too worried to leave, demanding to know where these men were taking him. He gently stroked her hair, telling her not to worry. He explained he was merely helping them with a small matter and was in no danger. To be honest, he added that no one in this world could actually hurt him anyway. Turning to Wang Chong, he requested that the chairman have someone drive his sister home, suggesting the fare be taken from his commission. Wang Chong stepped forward with a bow. The chairman insisted there was no need for such talk and immediately ordered his men to see the master's sister home. 2 bodyguards quickly stepped up to assist. Only after seeing Yunyao safely inside the car did Lin Feng finally breathe a sigh of relief. He then remarked to Wang Chong that driving would be far too slow. He suggested they fly instead. Wang Chong froze, remembering the reports from his subordinates about Lin Feng's abilities, and a sudden sense of foreboding washed over him. But before the chairman could even react, Lin Feng gripped his shoulder. Then, right before the eyes of the stunned bodyguards, the two of them transformed. They turned into a streak of light and vanished into the horizon. Just before they took flight, a beautiful woman standing nearby with a young girl had seen everything. She had watched the moment Lin Feng embraced Yun Yao, and tears began to stream down her face. She whispered that she had searched for him for 10 long years. Seeing him with another woman, she told herself that she, Chun Inoa, was finally done with him. From this moment on, they would have no further connection. With those final words, she turned and left the scene. Meanwhile, Lin Feng was soaring through the air with Wang Chong, and within minutes, they reached their destination. They arrived at the haunted construction site the chairman had described. As soon as they landed, a chilling, ghostly wind began to swirl around them. The cold air bit at them as it blew through the empty structures. Lin Feng advised the chairman to halt the project immediately, noting that the feng shui here was abysmal. Wang Chong hurriedly wiped the cold sweat from his forehead. The chairman pleaded, explaining that stopping now would cost him billions. He begged the master to find another way, hoping for a miracle to save his investment. Lin Feng glanced at him, clarifying that the 500 million was only the price for dealing with the walking corpses. Changing the land's fortune was another matter entirely. He explained that altering the feng shui here involved too much karmic risk. Even for 50 billion, he wouldn't touch it, which, naturally, was not what the chairman wanted to hear. He told Wang Chong to wait there and promised to return shortly. With a sudden flash, he vanished from the chairman's sight and reappeared near the source of the trouble. He stood before the unfinished buildings, ready to face whatever was. As Lin Feng moved deeper into the shadows, the heavy scent of death and decaying corpses filled the air. He immediately sensed a powerful spiritual barrier blocking his path, but without a moment's hesitation, he raised his hand and shattered the seal. Upon reaching the depths of the cavern, we see him discover a stone altar, upon which sat a small box radiating a strange, spiritual energy. He picked it up to examine it closely, finding 2 stones inside, one black and one white. These were the yin-yang twin stones. He wondered how such rare treasures for cultivation ended up here, suspecting they belonged to the mastermind behind the walking corpses. With a calm indifference, he pocketed the stones and set the entire place ablaze. But just as he was about to leave, a woman's cry for help echoed from behind a wall. Frowning, he shattered the stone structure to reveal what was hidden inside. There, tied up in a corner, was a young woman dressed in a rather peculiar bunny girl outfit. To be honest, it was a strange sight for a cave. He stepped forward to remove the gag from her mouth, asking who she was and why she was dressed like that in the middle of a forest. The girl gasped for air, explaining her name was Jiang Xining. She recalled playing games before falling asleep and waking up in this nightmare. She asked if he was the hero her father sent to save her. Lin Feng simply shook his head, told her he was just passing by, and turned to leave. He hadn't even taken 2 steps before Xining called out to him, offering to pay him if he would only take her with him. That certainly changed things. He stopped immediately and looked back, asking exactly how much she was prepared to offer for his trouble. Xining hesitated before explaining she was from the wealthy Jiang family, promising him 10 million if he got her out safely. Lin Feng was slightly surprised by her wealth, but he readily agreed. Meanwhile, back at the construction site, a middle-aged man arrived with a dozen lethal-looking bodyguards. Wang Chong looked at the leader in surprise, recognizing him as Yang Tianbao, a powerful enforcer and priest of the Jiang family. He asked what brought him there. Tianbao looked back with equal surprise, recognizing Wang Chong from the Azure Dragon Sword Society. Tianbao explained that the young miss of the Jiang family had gone missing, and he had tracked her to Taihu Mountain. He suggested they search together. Wang Chong suddenly had an idea. He mentioned he knew a master named Lin, a man of such great power that calling him a god wouldn't be an exaggeration. He was certain this master could find the girl. However, he noted that the great master's services did come with a rather significant price tag. Wang Chong rubbed his fingers together with a greedy smile, looking at Yang Tianbao, but Tianbao only responded with a cold, mocking laugh. He called Wang Chong a useless man who only rose to power through women, dismissing this supposed master as nothing more than a common fraud. He boasted that to mere ants, a true martial artist might seem like a god, but to him, such titles were meaningless exaggerations. His bodyguards joined in the mockery, claiming Lord Yang was a powerful warrior who could shatter stones with his bare hands. They questioned why a Master Lin could find the girl if they couldn't, suggesting Wang Chong had been fooled by simple parlor tricks. And this is where things get interesting, as Lin Feng returned with Jiang Xining just in time to hear himself being called a charlatan. A cold killing intent radiated from him as he noted that a mere street-level fighter had no right to insult a true immortal. Xining, spotting a familiar face, ran over to hug Tianbao, excitedly explaining that this big brother was the one who saved her. She urged her uncle to transfer the 10 million she promised as a reward, but Tianbao's expression shifted to one of sudden shock. With a look of utter disdain, he declared the reward void, suspecting that Lin Feng was actually the villain who kidnapped her. Xining grew frantic and tried to defend her savior, but Tianbao was convinced this was all an elaborate scheme to extort the family. He ordered his men to drag her into the car, warning her that the world is a wicked place and people are rarely what they seem. He planned to take Lin Feng back to the Jiang family for interrogation, and with a wave of his hand, his guards charged forward. These men were seasoned killers, yet as they surrounded him, Lin Feng's silhouette simply vanished into thin air. When he reappeared, the guards were already on the ground coughing up blood. He then offered them two very simple choices. Either they pay the debt now, or he would simply eliminate the girl, reasoning that if she were dead, he hadn't technically saved anyone. The area fell into a deathly silence as everyone stared in absolute shock. To be honest, it wasn't the typical hero's ultimatum. Tianbao let out a scoff, telling the young man not to let a little bit of strength go to his head, offering him a chance to retract his words. Lin Feng ignored the threat entirely, giving them exactly 10 seconds to choose before he started killing everyone in sight. Tianbao's face turned ice cold, but just as he prepared to strike, a sudden, rhythmic sound echoed from the entrance of the construction site. Faint footsteps followed, and then an old yellow weasel with a whitening beard slowly paced out in front of the crowd. The creature was over a meter long, its dark, beady eyes filled with an unsettlingly human intelligence as it stared them down. We hear it speak, asking if it looks more like a man or an immortal, a sight that left everyone frozen in shock, except for Lin Feng. Wang Chong swallowed hard, wondering if they were witnessing a spirit seeking a title, while Jiang Xining grew visibly tense. And yet, she wasn't truly afraid. She even looked on with curiosity, believing that with so many people and Yang Tianbao there, things would be fine. Tianbao stood before the car, his gaze sharp as he focused on the old weasel, dismissing it as nothing more than a mere beast. The weasel seemed to notice Xining's gaze and gave her a sinister smile, asking the young girl if it looked like a man or a god. At that moment, Tianbao let out a cold snort and threw a direct, powerful punch toward the creature. He accused it of playing tricks, but the weasel simply chuckled and dodged the attack with eerie, fluid grace. Tianbao's expression remained cold, every move he made now radiating a clear and deadly intent to kill. To be honest, it was clear the old weasel was just playing with him, while the man from the Jiang family was already giving his all. When asked who would win, Xining grew anxious, stepping out of the car to insist that her Uncle Yang was invincible. She claimed his thunderbolt fist was famous throughout Jinling City, but as she turned back to the fight, the mood shifted. The old weasel caught Tianbao's full-force punch with effortless ease, its claws then flashing toward his chest. It tore a deep wound right down to the bone, leaving Tianbao gasping in pain as he scrambled to create some distance. He quickly pressed several pressure points to stop the bleeding, a sight that made Wang Chong shudder with fear. Wang Chong frantically asked what they should do, but Lin Feng only gave him a cold, disinterested look. He suggested they simply keep watching. Had Tianbao paid him earlier, he might have helped, but some opportunities are lost forever. Xining cried out and rushed to support the wounded Tianbao, just as the old weasel shifted its focus toward Lin Feng. Its emerald eyes locked onto him, asking once more, "Young man, do I look like a man, or do I look like an immortal?" Lin Feng frowned, unimpressed that this creature dared to target him, as it repeated its chilling question, "Do I look like a man, or an immortal?" He let out a cold laugh, viewing the creature as nothing more than an ant, before his hand shot out with blinding speed. He instantly seized the old weasel by the throat. The creature's eyes widened in shock, but no matter how it struggled, it couldn't break free. With a simple, effortless application of force, he snapped the weasel's neck, and in that moment, the entire clearing fell into a heavy silence. Everyone watched him in absolute shock as he turned his gaze toward Wang Chong, explaining that this creature had been controlling the workers' corpses. Now that the beast was dead, the project could finally resume, and a dazed Wang Chong quickly snapped back to reality to show his gratitude. He bowed respectfully to the master, promising an immediate transfer, and after a few moments of tapping on his phone, the transaction was complete. Lin Feng nodded with satisfaction upon receiving the 500 million yuan, then shifted his calm, expectant gaze toward Jiang Xining and her group. He reminded them that their 10 million was now due, but before Yang Tianbao could speak, Xining lashed out at him in a fit of anger. She demanded to know why he hadn't acted sooner. If he had, her Uncle Yang wouldn't have been so gravely injured by that beast. Lin Feng looked at her with total indifference, asking why he should have bothered saving them when he owed them absolutely nothing. In his eyes, all living beings were merely ants, and he made it clear that no one under heaven could ever default on a debt to him. Xining, the pampered young lady of the Jiang family, was left speechless and lost, having never encountered someone so cold and unyielding. Tianbao forced himself to stand, admitting his earlier lack of judgment and offering double the price if Lin Feng would escort them home safely. Lin Feng turned to Wang Chong to ask if the Jiang family was truly wealthy, and Wang Chong confirmed they were a top-tier clan in Jinling City. With assets likely exceeding 1 trillion yuan, the family was legendary. Hearing this, Lin Feng smiled and looked back at the wounded Tianbao. He agreed to escort them, but noted that doubling the price wasn't nearly enough. He wanted 1,000 times the original amount. The clearing went silent once more as Tian Bao's expression darkened, his eyes narrowing at what he considered an absurdly greedy demand. Lin Feng's tone remained flat as he explained that greed had nothing to do with it. He was simply setting a price for a service they desperately needed. It was a simple business deal, accept or refuse. To him, asking for a few dozen billion from a trillion-yuan family seemed perfectly reasonable. Yang Tianbao cursed silently at the thought of such an outrageous price before turning his gaze toward the young Jiang Xining. He asked her to take the phone from his pocket and call the family to send a helicopter, while Lin Feng offered a helpful reminder. He warned them not to forget his money, noting that if the funds didn't arrive, he truly wouldn't mind taking a life. Xining shot him a sharp glare before making the call, and after a few brief words, she turned back to comfort her protector. She assured Uncle Yang that the family would arrive within half an hour to treat his wounds, allowing the man to finally exhale in relief. Tian Bao then looked at Lin Feng with eyes full of mockery, asking if the boy regretted missing his chance for a simple 10 million. He lectured him on how greed can ruin a man, but just as Lin Feng prepared a retort, something shifted in the air. A figure shrouded in a chilling, sinister energy entered Lin Feng's spiritual sense, and we see an old man emerging from the shadows. His hair was snow white and his body so withered he hardly looked human, radiating a deathly aura as if he had just crawled from a coffin. The sight made everyone's skin crawl, and suppressing his fear, Tian Bao demanded to know who this stranger was. The old man ignored him entirely, fixing his cloudy, ancient eyes on Lin Feng and remarking that heroes truly do emerge in youth. He noted that it was impressive for one so young to kill his two spirit weasels, assuming the previous talisman was also Lin Feng's work. Lin Feng remained perfectly still, watching the old man with an expressionless face and saying absolutely nothing. The elder warned him to stop meddling in affairs that didn't concern him, reminding him that there is always someone stronger in this world. Lin Feng simply gave a disdainful smile. He was curious about the old man's goal, and perhaps even hoped to profit from the encounter. The old man shifted his gaze to Tian Bao and Xining, his voice raspy and grim as he introduced himself as the bloody-handed butcher. He told the two juniors that if they were wise, they would come with him quietly to save him the trouble of using force. Tian Bao's body began to tremble as his heart raced with terror, prompting a confused Xining to ask if this butcher was truly dangerous. Tian Bao nodded grimly, explaining that 20 years ago, this man was one of the most notorious figures in the Jiang and martial arts world. He practiced a wicked technique known as the blood-sucking art, murdering others to fuel his own power, and in just 1 year, he had become a legend of terror. In his time, the number of people who died by his hand reached into the thousands, and even when the Jiangnan Martial Arts Alliance sent Earthrealm masters after him, they failed to capture him. Hearing Yang Tianbao's description, the group felt their skin crawl, yet Lin Feng simply watched with a sense of mild interest. To him, no matter how strong this man claimed to be, he was nothing more than an ant that could be crushed with a flick of a finger. Tianbao swallowed hard. He addressed the elder, saying that if the Jiang family had ever offended him, he could apologize and make amends on their behalf. The butcher gave a sinister laugh. He told them the Jiang family hadn't offended him personally, but they had certainly crossed someone else. At those words, Tianbao's heart sank heavily. He immediately thought of the Jiang family's greatest rival, the Qin family, who were also one of the 4 great clans. Realizing this, Tianbao forced a strained smile. He asked if it was the Qins who had sent the elder there. The bloody-handed butcher sneered, noting that since they didn't seem intent on coming quietly, they might as well just die. With that, his body lunged forward at an incredible speed, his large hand reaching out to seize Yang Tianbao by the throat. However, just at that moment, the sudden roar of an engine echoed through the sky. Everyone instinctively looked up toward the horizon. We see a helicopter fast approaching from the distance. Jiang Xining waved her hands in excitement, realizing that help had finally arrived. She shouted that it was the rescue team sent by the family. The butcher released Tianbao, his expression turning solemn as he glared at the sky. He vanished into the vast darkness of the night with startling speed. Lin Feng watched the direction the butcher fled, making a quiet decision. He decided it was best to collect his money first before settling the score with this so-called butcher. With a simple thought, he released a wisp of spiritual energy. He attached it to the old man's body, ensuring that no matter where the butcher fled, he could be found. The others, meanwhile, were left completely stunned. They watched in confusion as the terrifying killer fled without hesitation. Soon, the helicopter began its slow descent right before their eyes. Under the watchful gaze of the group, 7 people stepped off the craft. Leading them were a man and a woman. The man was dressed in white with handsome features. Beside him was a woman in a black dress, her beauty so striking and elegant that she seemed to have stepped right out of a painting. Upon seeing this woman, Lin Feng, who had been perfectly calm until now, suddenly froze in place as a shock ran through his entire body. He wondered why Chen Inua was here. At the same time, Inua's eyes landed directly on him among the small crowd. She seemed startled for a brief moment, but quickly regained her composure, a cold smirk playing on her lips as Xining ran toward her in excitement. We see Xining rush into the white-clad man's arms, calling him brother and asking why he came. He gently rubs her head, calling her a silly girl. He tells her that with such a major incident, he had to come personally. Normally, we wouldn't care about this man, but Chun Inua is standing right beside him. Seeing her there makes Lin Feng's heart feel heavy with a complex mix of emotions. He quietly asks Wang Chong who this man is. Wang Chong looks away. Taking a step back to stand beside Lin Feng, he explains that this is Jiang Junlin, the direct heir and future leader of the entire Jiang family. Even though Wang Chong is the leader of the Azure Dragon Gang and a chairman, before someone like Junlin, he can only bow his head in respect. Naturally, he doesn't dare to stare. Lin Feng mumbles the name to himself, then asks if the woman in the black dress is Junlin's wife. Wang Chong shakes his head, clarifying that she isn't his wife, but his fiancée. As far as he knows, Junlin hasn't actually married yet. Hearing this, Lin Feng is internally shocked. Inua was clearly married and even had a daughter, so how could she suddenly be Junlin's fiancée? He wonders if she has already gotten a divorce. While he is lost in thought, Junlin learns the details of the recent battle from Yang Tianbao. He immediately gestures for his subordinates to take Tianbao back for medical treatment, and then he turns his gaze toward Lin Feng with genuine interest. He addresses Lin Feng as little brother, admitting the Jiang family was at fault and offering a card with 20 million as a formal apology. With that, he steps forward and pulls a gold card from his pocket to hand over. Afterward, he shifts his attention toward Wang Chong. He acknowledges Wang Chong, noting that his Azure Dragon construction group is quite impressive and suggesting they might collaborate with the Jiangs soon. Wang Chong is visibly flattered, a smile breaking across his face as he thanks the young master for his kindness. Xining, however, is quite annoyed. She grabs Junlin's arm, complaining that Lin Feng stood by and watched them almost die, so she can't understand why he's being given money. Junlin frowns at her, pointing out that she wouldn't even be alive if not for this young man. Besides, he notes, Lin Feng had no obligation to save her. He asks her if she's forgotten his lessons on gratitude, reminding her not to be self-centered because no one is required to be kind to her. At those words, Xining pouts and glares at Lin Feng. Junlin then turns back, lowering his posture respectfully and urging Lin Feng to accept the money. Lin Feng stares at the offered bank card without saying a word. To be honest, Junlin's humble attitude is quite impressive for a powerful heir. He is clearly an exceptional man, but since he is Inua's fiancé, Lin Feng feels conflicted about taking his money, especially since the man seems gentle and refined, yet he feels like a puppet wearing a mask. Thinking of this, Lin Feng shifts his gaze toward Chun Inua, but he finds himself at a loss for words. Inua is also watching him, though unlike his complex gaze, her eyes are filled with nothing but cold indifference. She doesn't even try to hide the mocking smile on her lips. This tense moment is immediately caught by everyone present, and Wang Chong suddenly remembers the question Lin Feng just asked him. His skin crawls as he wonders if Lin Feng has actually set his sights on young Master Zhang's fiancée. If a fight breaks out, he has no idea what he'll do. Wang Chong wants to intervene, but he doesn't dare speak up. Jiang Junlin, meanwhile, keenly notices where Lin Feng is looking. Surprisingly, he doesn't get angry. Instead, he maintains his smile and introduces her, calling Lin Feng little brother and presenting his fiancée, Qinin'A. His words carry a heavy subtext, subtly reminding Lin Feng of his place, a warning not to reach for what is far above him. Lin Feng's expression remains flat, his voice devoid of any emotion as he replies. He notes that there is one thing young Master Jiang doesn't know. His fiancée is actually Lin Feng's ex-girlfriend. Junlin's face stiffens, while Wang Chong and Jiang Xinling stand there with their mouths hanging open in shock. Lin Feng looks at Inua and lets out a slow, heavy breath. He tells her it's been a long time. Inua steps forward, her tone perfectly calm as she agrees that it has indeed been 10 years. Looking at her cold face, Lin Feng feels a sharp pang of pain, but he eventually steps toward her. He wants to give her an explanation, asking if they can speak privately. However, Inua forcefully flings his hand away, her face turning ice cold. She asks if something is wrong with his head and tells him to stop being so disgusting. Seeing this, Junlin steps in, his voice now dropping to a chilling temperature. He warns Lin Feng that regardless of their past, she is his fiancée now, and he should show some respect before things get unpleasant. Lin Feng simply ignores Junlin's threat, his eyes never leaving Inua's. In the end, he can only let out a helpless, weary sigh. He tries to explain that 10 years ago, on the way to her house, an accident happened, and that he never once forgot about her. Inua cuts him off coldly, stating she has no interest in his stories or the past. To be honest, she couldn't care less about his excuses. She tells him to let the past stay in the past, claiming she is doing well now and asking him not to disturb her life. Lin Feng clenches his fists. Even if he explained every detail of those lost years, he realizes she might never forgive him. After a long silence, he can only manage a quiet, "I'm sorry." Seeing the pain on his face, Inua can't help but recall the scene she witnessed yesterday at the entrance of the Chuanshan Pavilion. Back then, her heart had already withered, and it just so happened that Jiang Junlin was pursuing her tirelessly. So, she agreed, leading to this very scene today. Her face is now a mask of mockery and ridicule. She feels like a fool for having waited 10 long years for such a hypocritical man. It truly was a laughable waste of time. She gives Lin Feng one last look before shifting her gaze to Junlin, simply telling him it's time to go home. With that, she walks off toward the black SUV parked by the roadside. The others follow close behind her, and once everyone is inside the vehicle, Junlin gives Lin Feng one final, lingering smile. He notes that since Lin Feng failed to cherish Inua back then, he will happily take over. He adds that there is one more thing Lin Feng surely doesn't know. Chen Inua is actually the legitimate daughter of the prestigious Chen family in Yinchuan. He asks if Lin Feng even understands what the Chen family represents. Lin Feng frowns. To be honest, he never knew much about Inua's family background. Whenever he asked about it during their time together, she would always find an excuse to brush the topic aside. He looks coldly at Junlin and asks if he is only marrying her for her status. Junlin merely offers a thin smile and asks, "What if I am?" In that moment, Lin Feng's killing intent can no longer be suppressed. He warns that if Inua suffers even a hint of grievance, Junlin will die, and the entire Jiang family will be buried alongside him. Hearing this, Junlin bursts into laughter, completely dismissing the threat as if it were a joke. He tells Lin Feng that October 1st is their wedding day and insists he must come for a drink, if only to mourn his lost youth. With a casual flick of his wrist, he tosses the $20 million bank card onto the ground and steps into the black SUV. As the car disappears into the night, Lin Feng stands frozen for a long time, his mind a chaotic mess filled with an unfillable sense of emptiness. Seeing this, Wang Chong shakes his head and steps forward to offer some comfort, suggesting that a man of Lin Feng's status could find any woman he wants. Lin Feng slowly closes his eyes, and when he opens them, his gaze has regained its former clarity. Without a word to Wang Chong, he vanishes into the darkness in a few swift blurs. Meanwhile, inside the SUV winding down the mountain road, the atmosphere is incredibly heavy. Junlin sits in the passenger seat, his fingers rhythmically tapping against the window frame with a faint, steady clicking sound. Inua finally speaks up. Her tone is ice cold as she tells him that if he wants to get angry, he should just do it instead of holding it all in. Junlin just smiles gently at her. He claims he could never bring himself to be angry with her. Inua curls her lip, asking who he's putting on this performance for, since he got what he wanted. She tells him bluntly that her daughter is Lin Feng's child, and if he minds, she will move out of the Jiang house tonight. Upon hearing Inua's words, Jiang Junlin simply stares in stunned silence, while the driver wishes he could go deaf right then and there to avoid hearing things he shouldn't. But Junlin doesn't get angry. Instead, he looks at Inua with deep affection and tells her never to say such things again. To any observer, he seems like the perfect man, accepting her past and treating her flawlessly, yet she still feels absolutely no spark of interest in him. With an air of sincerity, Junlin casually remarks that the past is the past, but he suggests she should keep her eyes open regarding the present. He claims he isn't one to gossip, but warns that Lin Feng is dangerous. Even he cannot see through the man's true strength. He suggests Lin Feng's return likely carries a hidden agenda, and as Inua listens, we see her expression flicker with growing uncertainty. Her mind begins to race with dark possibilities. Lin Feng vanished for 10 years, so why appear now? Perhaps he finally discovered her true identity and plans to use her to get close to the prestigious Chen family. The mere thought causes her immense pain, while Junlin watches her with a triumphant smirk. He then mentions he has found a miracle doctor who might be able to cure little Lilian's rare condition, but he adds a chilling warning. He insists she must keep this a secret from Lin Feng, or the man might use their daughter as a bargaining chip to threaten her. Inua simply nods and offers a quiet thank you. Meanwhile, we follow Lin Feng as he tracks the blood-handed Yi Tianxin into the Taihu Mountains. When his divine stone finally scans the target, the man is sitting before a massive tree, attempting to regulate his internal energy. Upon closer inspection, Lin Feng notices something strange about the man's body. It seems he has been practicing a dark, demonic art. Though his martial prowess is formidable, his life force has withered as if he were 100 years old. Not that Lin Feng cares, of course. Yi Tianxin senses someone approaching and immediately goes on guard, but he lets out a sigh of relief when he sees it is only Lin Feng. He lets out a raspy, sinister laugh, admitting he thought the Jiang family guards had caught up to him. Lin Feng merely tilts his head, his voice cold. He mentions finding the yin-yang stones in the cave earlier and demands the man hand over the rest if he wants to keep his life. Yi Tianxin's eyes widen as a murderous intent flares up. He had assumed that a man named Yang Tianbao had stolen them, and figured he'd have to surrender if the Jiang family sent reinforcements, but finding them in Lin Feng's hands means the boy has no reason to live. With those words, Yi Tianxin slams his foot into the ground and lunges forward, his hand curved into a deadly claw aimed straight for Lin Feng's throat. However, Lin Feng simply gives a casual wave of his hand. Before the man can even react, a massive surge of internal energy blasts outward, striking him in the abdomen and sending him flying into a tree trunk. It is a pathetic sight, really, as he struggles to crawl back up from the dirt. The look in his eyes is now one of pure terror. He recognizes this as the legendary technique of projecting internal energy, a feat only a Heaven Realm master should possess. He wonders how he, a late-stage Earth Realm expert, couldn't even withstand a single blow. At this moment, Yi Tianxin feels a chill running through his entire body. After being so effortlessly wounded, he no longer dares to act arrogant. Lin Feng walks forward with an expressionless face, his voice remaining cold. He tells the man to hand over the Inyang stones, noting that this is an order, not a request. He suggests the man consider how many more of those hits he can take. To be perfectly honest, Lin Feng doesn't actually care that much about the stones, but the events at the construction site had left him feeling quite frustrated. He simply wanted someone to vent his anger on, and the blood-handed Yi Tianxin just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Yi Tianxin's eyes are filled with dread. Seeing Lin Feng closing in, his legs give way and he falls to his knees, desperately kowtowing for mercy. He begs the senior to spare his life, promising to be his loyal dog, but he frantically claims he no longer has those 2 stones. Lin Feng stops and watches him quietly. Since the man is being so cooperative, he decides that if he answers a few questions, he might just let him live. Yi Tianxin nods repeatedly in gratitude, promising to tell the senior everything he knows without holding back a single detail. Lin Feng nods with satisfaction. He knows that while this man is a villain, it is often those with the least shame who manage to survive the longest. He asks why the man targeted that specific construction site. Yi Tianxin's voice trembles with nerves as he explains that the noise from the construction was simply too loud and annoyed him, so he caused some trouble in secret. He claims he had no other malicious intent, which makes Lin Feng shake his head in disbelief. He then asks who ordered the kidnapping of Jiang Ximing. The man reveals it was Qin Tianzhu of the Qin family, and that is where he obtained the Inyang stones. Lin Feng nods, then asks what he wanted with the stones in the first place. Yi Tianxin hesitates for a moment before letting out a heavy sigh. He explains that the technique he practices is called the blood-sucking method, which allows him to increase his power by consuming human blood. However, this art has a fatal flaw. It corrodes his own bloodline and drains his life essence. He mentions that a master once told him there was a way to fix it. He explains that using these Inyang stones to temper his body could eliminate the side effects, which is why he demanded them from the Qin family. Lin Feng rubs his chin, lost in thought for a moment. He tells the man to set up a meeting with this Qin Tianzhu, promising that once the stones are in his hands, Yi Tianxin can leave. As soon as the words are spoken, Yi Tianxin doesn't hesitate for a second to call Qin Tianzhu. The call connects quickly, and he speaks in a sinister tone, claiming that he has captured the target. He tells him the location is over by Taihu Mountain and that he can come for the exchange now. There is a brief silence on the other end before the man immediately agrees. He says he understands and will head over right away. The call is disconnected, and half an hour later, a faint sound of footsteps is heard echoing through the mountain forest. We see Lin Feng look toward the sound, spotting a middle-aged man in gray clothes rushing toward them at high speed. This, of course, is Qin Tianzhu. He approaches and scans the surroundings, his brow furrowing slightly when his eyes land on Lin Feng, though he doesn't seem to take the young man seriously. He simply asks where the person is. Yi Tianxin doesn't answer him immediately, instead asking if he brought the Inyang stones. Qin Tianzhu nods and reaches into his waist bag. He pulls out a small wooden square box containing 2 small stones of different colors, representing the extreme yin and extreme yang. To be honest, they look quite ordinary for such rare items. A look of pure greed instantly flashes in Yi Tianxin's eyes. Qin Tianzhu glances at him, his expression remaining entirely unchanged by the man's hunger for the stones. He lets out a soft, mocking laugh, telling Yi Tianxin that he never actually caught anyone, did he? He accuses him of lying just to lure him out and steal the stones. He asks if the man really thought he wouldn't see through such a trick. Yi Tianxin is startled, asking why he came if he already knew. Qin Tianzhu explains that he finally realized something. Relying on someone like Yi Tianxin was a complete waste of time, and since the man knows too many of the Qin family's secrets, he decided to handle things personally tonight. He came to eliminate him and end any future trouble. He claps his hands, and an old man in flowing robes emerges from the depths of the forest. He greets Yi Tianxin, noting that it has been a very long time since they last met. But this time, the old man has the misfortune of running into Lin Feng. Yi Tianxin leans toward Lin Feng's left side with a fawning expression, bowing his head respectfully. He whispers to his senior that this man is Qin Kuan, a master from the previous generation of the Qin family whose strength has likely reached the peak of the Earth realm. Lin Feng simply nods, showing no reaction whatsoever. Seeing this, both Qin Kuan and Qin Tianzhu narrow their eyes in suspicion. This was not what they expected. They wonder why the infamous, blood-handed Yi Tianxin is acting so subserviently towards such a young man. They begin to study Lin Feng very closely. But no matter how hard they look, they cannot perceive his cultivation level. They assume he is just an ordinary person, and Qin Tianzhu lets out a disdainful sneer. Qin Tianzhu sneers, telling Yi Tianxin that he's truly hit rock bottom if he's bowing and scraping before a mere brat. Hearing this, Yi Tianxin can't help but let out a short laugh. To him, these two are just frogs in a well, blind to the world. Lin Feng, meanwhile, realizes Yi Tianxin is hiding behind his authority, but he doesn't react much, simply glancing at Yi Tianxin before turning his gaze back to the two men. He tells them plainly that he has no time to waste. He demands they hand over the Inyang stones so they can leave. Qin Tianju laughs coldly, wondering where this fool came from, as even the current alliance leader wouldn't dare speak to him that way. He advises the young man to kneel and apologize immediately or face the unbearable wrath of the Qin family. Lin Feng simply shakes his head, and in an instant, his figure vanishes from where he stood. A heartbeat later, he appears directly in front of Qin Tianju. His right hand reaches out, seizing the man by the throat. Qin Tianju's eyes widen in shock, unable to squeeze out even a single sound. With a casual air, Lin Feng finds the small box containing the Inyang stones on the man's person, then tosses him aside like a piece of trash. Qin Tianju slams into a large tree. As he regains his breath, he gasps for air, unable to stop himself from coughing up a mouthful of fresh blood. Watching this, Yi Tianxin feels incredibly relieved that he made the right choice. Qin Kuen's expression, however, changes instantly. He rushes to Qin Tianju's side to help him up, asking if he's alright. Qin Tianju nods, his face twisting into a look of pure malice as he glares at Lin Feng. Although he's wary after that display, he isn't truly afraid yet. In his mind, Lin Feng simply relied on a fast movement technique to catch him off guard. He believes that as long as he's prepared, there won't be another opening. He demands to know who Lin Feng is and why he's helping a criminal like Yi Tianxin steal from the Qin family, warning him of the trouble he's caused. Lin Feng puts the wooden box away and looks at him with a flat expression. He asks if the Qin family is truly that powerful compared to the Jiang family. Qin Tianju reacts instantly, assuming Lin Feng was sent by the Jiang family for revenge. Lin Feng shakes his head, noting that in this world, no one has the power to command him. Hearing this, Qin Tianju breathes a sigh of relief and gives Qin Kuen a subtle signal. Qin Kuen understands perfectly. The two move quickly, surrounding Lin Feng from the front and back. Qin Tianju wipes the blood from his mouth, his tone turning icy. He claims that now that he's prepared, Lin Feng's movement techniques are useless. Qin Kuen sneers as well, calling him a talented brat, but reminding him there is always someone stronger. He warns that the Qin family isn't to be provoked. Yet, facing their pincer attack, Lin Feng he casually waves a hand, and in an instant, both men are sent flying by an invisible force, crashing into the ground with enough impact to leave a crater. Watching from the sidelines, Yi Tianxin can't help but swallow hard. He realizes that if he hadn't surrendered earlier, the person lying broken in that pit would surely have been him. As we look at the wreckage in the crater, it becomes clear just how vast the gap in power truly is. To Lin Feng, anyone below the heaven realm is a mere ant. Should they dare to resist again, he could crush them as easily as flicking a finger. Yi Tianxin, unable to contain his delight, bursts into laughter, mocking Qin Tianju for finally meeting his match. Qin Tianju, meanwhile, shoots him a look of pure, unfiltered murderous intent. Lin Feng pays their bickering no mind, simply tucking away the small box containing the Inyang stones. He prepares to depart, but before he can get very far, Yi Tianxin's voice rings out from behind, desperately calling for the senior to wait for him. Once the two have finally left, Qin Tianju can no longer contain his simmering rage, and he slams a frustrated fist into a nearby tree trunk. He laments their terrible luck, realizing that if they had known that senior would take the stones anyway, they should have just offered them freely. At least then, they might have earned his favor. Qin Kuen nods with a look of utter helplessness, noting that the Jiang family has now allied with the Qin family of Yinchuan. As one of the most formidable powers in the region, the Qin clan boasts no fewer than 5 Heaven Realm Masters. A terrifying thought, indeed. If they don't find a countermeasure soon, their kidnapping of Jiang Xingning will surely lead to the Qin families' total destruction once the Jiang and Qin families are united by marriage. Qin Tianju sighs, admitting that the kidnapping was meant to be their leverage against the Jiangs, but he never expected Yi Tianxin to betray them. Qin Kuen falls silent for a moment as a new thought occurs to him. He recalls that the marriage alliance was only possible because the Qin family's heiress, Qin Yinhua, had a daughter out of wedlock. To be honest, the situation is quite specific. The child suffers from a rare disease, and the Jiang family only secured the marriage by finding a divine doctor to treat her. He suggests that if they intervene there, they might turn the tide. He remembers that the miracle worker, Sai Huadao, still owes the Qin family a favor. If they can convince him to help and pull the Qin family to their side, the Jiangs will be no threat. And if that fails, they'll simply have to arrange for Qin Yinhua to be eliminated quietly. Meanwhile, Lin Feng hears Yi Tianxin's voice trailing after him as he continues on his way. Lin Feng turns back, a flash of displeasure crossing his face as he asks why the man is following him, warning that he won't be so polite if it continues. With that, he turns to leave without giving him a chance to explain. Yi Tianxin hesitates for a moment, watching his back, but finally grits his teeth and follows anyway. The senior has barely heard the man's voice before he spins around, instantly grabbing Yi Tianxin by the throat with a grip like iron. He asks coldly if his words were unclear. Yi Tianxin's face turns a deep shade of red as he struggles to breathe, stammering out that he wants to make a deal. Lin Feng raises an eyebrow at this and carelessly tosses him to the ground, wondering aloud what someone like him could possibly offer in a trade. Yi Tianxin scrambles up from the dirt, gasping for air. He points out that at the senior's current level, even the Inyang stones won't provide much of a boost. However, without that treasure, Yi Tianxin admits he likely won't survive more than 3 months. It is a desperate situation, to be sure. Lin Feng remains unimpressed, noting that the man's life is worth very little to him. Expecting this reaction, Yi Tianxin begins to sell his own usefulness. He acknowledges that his life is trivial to a master, but insists that in the secular world, he is a top-tier figure who knows every major power in Jiangnan City. He claims that even the martial alliance can't catch him, which he believes proves his worth. Hearing this, Lin Feng falls into a quiet contemplation. We see him weighing the options. Having just returned to the secular world, he lacks subordinates to handle the more tedious tasks of daily life. Having an Earth Realm martial artist like Yi Tianxin to deal with trivial matters wouldn't be such a bad thing. Sensing the shift in mood, Yi Tianxin seizes the moment. He presses his forehead to the ground, begging the senior to take him in and promising to handle any inconvenient business that might arise. Ultimately, Lin Feng gives a small nod, granting the request. Seeing this, Yi Tianxin's face lights up with immediate joy, though he remains cautious. He glances tentatively at the senior's pocket, asking about the yin-yang stones. Lin Feng makes it clear that giving them up is out of the question. However, he offers to cure the man's condition instead. You see, during his long years of cultivation, Lin Feng mastered more than just combat. His skill in alchemy is equally peerless, and the side effects of a mere martial arts technique are nothing more than a minor nuisance to him. Yi Tianxin is momentarily stunned, barely able to process the offer as he asks if it's truly possible. Lin Feng confirms it with a simple nod. He promises to write a prescription that will fully heal the man's condition within half a day. Upon hearing this, Yi Tianxin doesn't hesitate to show his gratitude. He knocks his head against the ground 3 times, each strike louder than the last, vowing that if he is restored, he will serve Lin Feng forever. Yi Tianxin vows to go through fire and water for his new master. Lin Feng watches him quietly, knowing full well that this man is both cunning and treacherous. If he could betray the Qin family, he could certainly betray Lin Feng, too. But our protagonist isn't worried. In the face of absolute power, all schemes are futile. Just then, his phone suddenly rings. As soon as he answers, Lin Yunyao's panicked voice reaches his ears, sounding utterly terrified. She begs her brother not to come, crying that there are too many of them and he should just save himself. Hearing this, Lin Feng's heart sinks with a heavy thud. Before he can say a word, a man's somber voice takes over the line, mockingly asking Lin Feng if he heard his little sister's lovely voice. Lin Feng's expression darkens instantly, his voice becoming as cold as a deep abyss. He doesn't care who they are or why they kidnapped her. He demands they release her immediately and return her without a single scratch. If they do, he might consider letting the matter go entirely. Otherwise, he promises to arrive at their location within 10 minutes and tear them to pieces. To be honest, they should probably take him seriously. He warns that everyone connected to them will die a miserable death because of their actions. There is a brief, heavy silence on the other end of the line. Then, a burst of manic, crazed laughter erupts. The man mocks Lin Feng, calling him incredibly arrogant for someone in his position. The kidnapper admits he planned to give the location, but now he's changed his mind just to see how Lin Feng could possibly arrive in 10 minutes. He sneers that such arrogance comes with a price, and if Lin Feng isn't there in 10 minutes, he can start preparing his sister's funeral. The line goes dead, leaving Lin Feng's killing intent radiating toward the sky. Beside him, Yi Tianxin trembles on the ground, barely daring to breathe. Lin Feng forces himself to remain calm. We learn that he had previously placed a spiritual mark on his sister for just such an emergency. If her life were in true danger, the mark would erupt, instantly killing anyone nearby regardless of their strength. It is a formidable insurance policy. Since he feels no fluctuations from the mark, he knows she is safe for the moment. With that thought, he closes his eyes to focus. He senses the exact location of the spiritual mark and realizes they are near the small house in the suburbs. He turns his gaze toward Yi Tianxin. He commands the man to head to the small house in Lin family village immediately. Without another word, Lin Feng suddenly takes flight into the air. He vanishes into the vast night sky in the blink of an eye. This sight leaves Yi Tianxin completely stunned, as even Heaven Realm experts cannot fly. He mutters to himself, wondering if the senior has already surpassed the Heaven Realm. It seems his earlier plans for betrayal are quickly fading away. He had planned to slip away once his hidden injuries were healed, but after witnessing this, he suddenly feels that being a loyal follower might not be such a bad idea after all. Meanwhile, inside an abandoned factory in the suburbs, a man puts down his phone with a look of pure mockery, radiating the powerful aura of a peak gold rank warrior. Opposite him sits a middle-aged man in a gray robe whose cultivation has reached the even higher mystic realm. They are clearly the ones in charge here. In addition to the two leaders, 30 or 40 burly men in black suits stand around the warehouse, each of them holding a machine gun that gives off a chilling, lethal energy. The gray-robed man looks toward the one who just answered the call and asks, "So, Ada, what did that kid have to say for himself?" Ada chuckles dismissively, noting that the boy is incredibly arrogant, even daring to threaten to kill them all if his sister isn't returned safely. Upon hearing this, the gray-robed man can't help but burst into laughter. According to the intelligence sent back by Xiao Ji and the others, this Lin Feng was able to stop an excavator with his bare hands, making him at least a gold-rank martial artist. But with their current firepower, even a mystic realm expert would be turned into a sieve. Ada nods, though he mentions it was strange that Xiao Ji and his crew suddenly dropped dead right after reporting in. To be honest, it was a bit unsettling. He assumes Lin Feng must have planted some kind of bomb inside them. After their brief chat, the two martial artists simultaneously turn their gaze toward a corner of the factory. In that dark corner, we see Lin Yunyao crouching on the ground, her face pale as she hugs her knees, her body trembling uncontrollably. She is, after all, just an ordinary college student. Imagine the scene, a young girl surrounded by armed thugs in a cold, derelict warehouse. She has never seen anything like this and naively believes these people are only after the house demolition money, pleading with them to take the funds and let her go. Ada walks over to Lin Yunyao, a look of greedy desire crossing his face as he tells her they don't care about any demolition money. He explains that her brother killed over a dozen of their brothers, and this time, they are only here to seek bloody revenge against Lin Feng. Lin Yunyao's face fills with panic as she recalls the time Brother Ji and his men cornered her and Li Xiaoka in the yard before her brother appeared to save them. She tells herself it's impossible, insisting her brother let them go and couldn't have killed so many people. She is certain there must be a misunderstanding. Ada squats down in front of her and laughs out loud, telling the girl that her brother is actually quite a ruthless man. He mentions that on the phone, Lin Feng even claimed he was coming over to wipe out everyone in the building. Hearing this, Lin Yunyao trembles, terrified for her brother's safety. A flicker of hesitation crosses her face as she asks if they can please let him go. Ada's laughter grows even more predatory as he suggests there might be a way.